love grammar. I know you're gonna, this question's already been asked. I love grammar. I love language. I love anything, any kind of learning language. And when I'm learning a language, I want to know how it works. But how many people love grammar and can understand it? Okay, we're among friends here. You know what you call people that like grammar and can really understand it? Abnormal. Okay. Most of our students don't understand grammar, and you can teach them and teach them, and they just won't get it. But anyone of normal cognition can learn to speak and understand a language.
Hi, I was coming to introduce you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. For the following session, titled Teaching Latin with Comprehensible Input, the books and the back and forth that make it happen will be presented by Mr. Bryce Hedstrom, who is a teacher and teacher trainer from Colorado. Please welcome Mr. Hedstrom.
Okay. Good job. Oh, that's right. Okay. So before we start, I want to do a couple of things. I'm not going to show you a PowerPoint. You want that? All right. I'm just going to talk to you, and we're going to talk back and forth. I'm not going to say at the end, any questions? I'm going to say, if you have a question right now, 10 other people have that exact same question. So ask your question during the session. Second thing, there's some good sessions going on that I'd like to be in right now. If this doesn't match, if the session we're doing doesn't match what you thought it would be, I won't be offended at all if you leave. In fact, I'll follow the last 2 or 3 people out. I hear Dr. McPherson. So if you have a device, open this up right now, or just copy this down. I don't want you to have to copy tons and tons of notes. Much of what I'm going to be talking about is on my website. And I have a special page devoted to Latin. And on that page, at the very top, is some special resources just for you all at this conference. All right, so you can find those, and that will work for you. Where I'm coming from on this with comprehensible input is I'm following the ideas of Stephen Krashen that have been around for 45, 50 years. And it's in the field of second language acquisition. Study after study after study have been used with this. And it's not been disproven. He has 5 hypotheses. How many people have heard of Stephen Krashen? Okay, good. All right. He has 5 main hypotheses that he put out like 1982, I think. And then one more recent one that was in the 2000s. But it makes this, I put it in this acronym, and this will help you understand where I'm coming from on this. The acronym MANIAC. I could have put it like a CI man, but I like maniac. If you know these, you'll teach like a maniac. Not crazy, but just fluidly, unself-consciously, and everyone will get what you're talking about. So, those of you who say you know about Krashen, what are a couple of his hypotheses of language acquisition? Remember any of them?
I don't know, but does M start from memory?
No?
Oh, okay.
That would be a good one. Yeah. Has to do with memory. The M is the monitor hypothesis. And these are all on my website. So you don't have to write all this stuff, just start deleting it. Yeah. It's all on my website under free stuff, the very top one, tools to help you be a better teacher. So the monitor is that it's good to know the rules and it's good to know the grammar. And the monitor is the part of your head that checks to see if you're saying it right. The monitor only is useful in 3 ways, though. The monitor is only useful when you're focused on a rule and you are demonstrating you know the rule and you have time to implement the rule. That only happens on a test. It doesn't happen when the student's reading or when they're writing. Mostly if they're writing, have to write fast. It doesn't happen. It doesn't help at all if they're speaking. So I put this first because people always ask about the grammar. The A is a big one in our classes, the affective filter hypothesis. And that means the affect of the emotions. All learning is filtered through emotions. And if someone is tense or worried that someone's going to make fun of them in class or the teacher is correcting them all the time, they learn much more slowly, if at all. And so that's one that just like makes sense, right? The N is the natural order of acquisition. And this says that people acquire languages in a certain order, and you can't change that order. It doesn't matter if you try to teach certain rules. It's usually grammar we're talking about. If you try to do that, you try to change the order, if you try to introduce something too early, they're not going to get it. You have to kind of follow the order. The trouble is, different students are in different places. And so you can't just get a curriculum that will follow a natural order. You have to teach them with comprehensible input, something that's interesting to them and that they can understand. So the I follows that. That's the input hypothesis. And that's the big one, that people acquire language by input. Input means understanding messages in the language. And so you have to know a core of words, and then little by little, based on the context in which you're hearing, you learn more and more and more. And that's how everyone learns language according to this hypothesis. Another A here is the acquisition, I'll read it, the acquisitional learning hypothesis. And this says that languages are different from other disciplines. That language is acquired in a different way. Everyone can acquire language given input. With normal cognitive ability, you can learn a language. You pick up a language. Acquisition is just picking it up. Learning is studying it. This hypothesis says that if you can only use the language you've acquired. The learning is the memorized language. And so with Latin, this becomes a real different thing because we think that in the last 200 years anyway, we've thought that dead languages can only be learned by studying rules, learning all the rules, and then you can eventually get it. If you have a device, I have put the most powerful argument for this first on my Latin page for y'all. And this is a paper recently written by a professor at Washington University that Pastor Josh Hedstrom, Washington U graduate, right? That says he just confronts this deal with Latin. that most people can't read Latin fluently. That most people, even if they're Latinists, even with a master's degree, even with a doctorate degree, can't read Latin fluently. That it's hard work plowing through, looking up words all the time. It's decoding rather than reading it fluently. And I mean, it's a problem. It's not because Latin teachers or people studying Latin are bad. It's not because of anything. It's just we haven't had enough input in Latin to become fluent. And we've been taught in ways that we think that it's decoding. These are Krashen's main hypotheses, those 5. This one, the compelling input hypothesis, says if the input is compelling to students, it will cover everything you need. And that's all we need. That sounds a little bit too simplistic. Krashen puts it a little bit more academic. But those are the main things. That's what's behind Latin, teaching with comprehensible input, any language. So how do you do this? How do you do this with kids that don't know any Latin? What do? You got to teach them a few words at first. And you can do this with actions. Right? Write down TPR. As total physical response. Total physical response. And this was promoted or invented, I guess, by James Asher in the 1960s. And Asher really was on something. I find this is like the easiest, funnest thing for students to come and bear. They don't want anything at all. So you teach them a few words with actions, and then you start to incorporate those into silly commands, and then put those into little stories. You have your devices open. So look at my webpage, Bryce Hedstrom. Look at the Latin page, and then I have a story in there. Scroll on down past the books part. There's a story called, I think it's called Juega Parla at Liber Magnus. And it's just it's a little story we did in class. And there's a step-by-step Latin lesson for like a week doing that. And they can read that at the end of the week easily, act it out. But you teach them with actions to get them going. Once you teach the core words of the language, they can start reading way faster than you would ever believe. And that's where the books come in. There's this one here. I brought some examples. These are books that we've used in my classes. The green markings on here indicates this is Bryce Hedstrom's copy. But these 3 books we taught in Latin 1. This one right here, Rufus Utulentus, Muddy Rufus. It has 20 unique words, and 1,200 total words. We started teaching this like the 2nd or 3rd week of school, Latin 1, with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. We've never had Latin. So I'll pass these around. These ones I want back, but you can all look at these. These ones I'm going to give away. So about 30 books of all levels there. I don't know how we're going to do it. Thumb wrestling. I'll pass these around. what's good about something like this, this author, Lance Piantagini, Magister P, he really gets teaching, he gets controlling the language and making a compelling story that's set in ancient Rome. He gets all that. Unfortunately, he's kind of woke, so you can't trust all of his books. These ones are good, okay? But I have a list of books on my website that I use, but there's Rufus Lutulensis, Rufus et Anima Atra. That's a good one. And then this is Agrippina Mater Fortis. This is, it's all the same family, it's all the same setting. When your kids read many books by one author, they start getting to be better readers. You see this, right? Kids will read the whole Harry Potter series in English, right? That's 1 million words of print. They get pretty good at reading after that, right? This is the same kind of thing we're doing on a small scale in Latin 1 classes with these books. So I'll pass these around for you all to look at them, and I'll let you do that. I'm disappointed in you right now. Nobody has stopped me, nobody's asked me questions. I've been thinking about this for 25 years. And I've been presenting this for ages and ages, okay? I just really been thinking about this a lot. There's no way you're getting all this in my wonderful presentation. Yeah. Yes?
I've seen those novellas before.
Yeah.
Do you have a curriculum with that? Do those?
I don't, but these are the ones I've used in Latin 1.
Okay.
And I have, on my website, I have the Latin Bookshare. And so you can kind of build your own curriculum with them. I have 120 books right now, my books I recommend for my Latin Bookshare, and they're all in order. And so I have early novice level, no exposure at all to Latin. Like you can read them in the first 2 weeks of class like these. And it goes on up to Latin 3 or 4.
Do
And so
you use an additional curriculum with those books?
do I use an additional curriculum? No, I
You
don't.
use those books now?
I use those books and I tell stories. I make up stories like the Whale story.
How many books do you go through a year?
In class, we'll do 3 or 4 that we'll read together as a whole class. But students are expected to read 1 book a week on their own outside of class. That's the general rule. I require them to read the 3rd through 5th grade. I require them to read 60 minutes a week, and above that, 90 or 100 minutes, 200 to 100 minutes a week. Yes?
So when you're teaching the vocabulary words, do you just teach them in their dictionary form, and then how do you deal with them when they show up in different endings and in different places in the sentence?
Great example. I start off, hopefully this is I start off, I'll teach surrogate, stand up, conceded, sit down, and so I teach them in the 3rd person present indicative.
Which is the way they would usually show up in a narrative?
Yeah, well, that's the way they show up in a story.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, so it's ready to wear Latin. I don't teach them the infinitive or the I form, like would show up in a dictionary or something, because that's not instantaneously useful to them. And so I teach them surrogate, consented, ambulant. Those are the first 3 words I teach to get them up and down and moving in class. And then I'll teach those step, fast, slow, walk in a circle. I'll say this in English. Does everybody speak Latin in here? Raise your hand if you don't speak Latin. Larry. Okay, so we're going in English. So this is stand up, sit down, walk. So I would say stand up, and I'd say stand up fast, sit down slowly. Walk in a circle, and use lots of words that they can kind of understand. Walk in a circle slowly. Walk with 1 leg. They're like, how can you do that? I guess that's your problem. My problem. Okay. And so this is the first word. And so, yeah, I teach them the third person present tense in the indicative. To start, because that's what they'll see in a story, because that's all narrated in the present tense. And that's why they can read that second week of class. So, yes.
So on your website, you call it vocabulary controlled. Are you saying that you're doing it vocabulary controlled, meaning you're controlling the vocab? Is that what
Yep.
you're meaning?
When these books get around to you,
Yeah.
you'll see that they're really extremely, the vocabulary is really, really tight, controlled.
Oh, I see.
Like the Rufus, Utulentus has 20 words in it, 20 total words, which is magnificent. I taught Spanish for 30 years, and we never had anything that was that well controlled. You know, because people just tend to know a lot more Spanish than they know Latin.
So you don't, so, you know, in the whole classical world, the five canons of rhetoric, Memoria, we're gonna really memorize this. So you're basically taking us out of the classical way of thinking of instructing Latin
Yeah.
and moving us to, okay, we're gonna just focus in on these books that can teach the vocab. And
Yes.
the grammar will come because it's in the books, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, the grammar is correct, the grammar is embedded in the books, and they just start getting it. I have a granddaughter who was in fourth grade in my class, and she started reading, or we were reading one of these books in her class, this one, Hegel Polyphemus. And I just opened it up and I said, Nora, just read this to me in English. So she's looking at the Latin and she's reading it in English. You would think she was reading English. I said, how did you know how to do that? Because like the verb doesn't come to the very end of the sentence. And you put it at the very beginning of your sentence in English. I said, how do you know how to do that? And she gives me a fourth grade answer. She goes, well, because my brain just figured it out. Okay, that's exactly right. And so, this is, if they know the vocabulary, they will figure out the grammar. And I'm not at all opposed to grammar, but yes, we're not doing this with like classical teaching, which has only been, Latin has only been taught this way the last like 200 years. When it quit being spoken or used, we switched it into we switched from acquisition, like using the language, to learning, right? Where we just learn all the rules and then we just figured, golly, you'll be able to speak the language and be able to understand the language.
So are your students able in the high school levels to do like translation with Cicero and the
I'm
Latin?
sorry, speak a little bit.
So in the upper levels, are your students able to translate Cicero or the Latin Vulgate or anything like that? Have you seen them, be successful?
I'll let you know, because I'm teaching Latin 3 this year. I'm teaching Latin 1, Latin 2, Latin 3.
Because I mean, when you get up to those levels,
Yeah,
they are translating through the ideas that, it's not word for word anymore. It's
Yeah.
in the figures of speech, it's the idiomatic, thoughts. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I'm planning on using Caesar, and I'm planning on using a lot of the Vulgate
Okay.
in Latin 3.
Mhm.
And actually, Christian Preuss, we're going to talk about this, he said that the Vulgate is a good bridge between early readers like these and classical. And so that's why I'm focusing a lot on the Vulgate. And we'll be reading some of the easier, so some of the books that have simpler vocabulary, like 1 John or the Gospel of John. Like a lot of things, a lot of Latin. I'm used to Spanish and trading missionaries, but I would start them up with 1 John and John, maybe Mark. We wouldn't get it all into like Romans or a lot of other books by Paul, especially using higher level grammar and language. And so that's going to be my general plan with
So
Latin
you, so
3.
you don't have like a specific curriculum, but you just maybe have a syllabus that you go after you do it, kind of thing?
I don't have a specific curriculum, but if you look at, on my website, all those books are like in order. And that's, I spread them out. We have over 120 books in our Latin classroom library. And I put them from easiest to hardest. And we have many, many copies of several of them. And remember, my grandkids are in these classes, right? So granddad spares no expense, right? We'll just get them books. The kids are reading books on their own, and I know what they're capable of doing. And so I don't have a curriculum. And my syllabus is real kind of vague. I can send it to you if you like. In fact, here's how to get a hold of me, how to get in contact with me really hard. contact@brycehedstrom.com. All right, that's how to get in touch with me. So I'll send my syllabus, because I'm with parents, you know. A lot of it is heavy with scripture and prayers and memorizing things. And I'll get to some other specifics in here.
How do you check when you tell a kid, read this book?
Yeah.
What do you do to find out whether he comprehended it afterwards?
Great question. I ask him about it.
Okay.
My biggest class is like 12 students. And so I say, what have you been reading? Oh, man, what'd you think about that one part? You know, and you can tell if they're faking, you know. So I don't do, the independent reading is their reading because they've picked out the book and they want to read it and it's at a level they want. And some kids pick books that are way too hard. I had Caesar and Gallic Wars, and I had a fourth grader that said, I want to read that, I think that sounds cool. And I'm like, okay, go ahead, you know? And no, bless his heart, but anyway. But, you know, I just let them read what they want, what's interesting to them. It has to be two things. And I said, I don't have tattoos, but I thought about getting interesting and comprehensible right there. What's your book supposed to be like, you guys? Right, interesting, comprehensible. What's that mean? Means I can understand it and I like it? That's right, very good. Yeah, so you just have to pound that into it, because we don't do that normally in school. They read stuff that's not interesting to them and that they can't understand. Yes.
When you read the books together in school, how do you do?
Very good. I start off, I read, you know, when I say in Spanish, this is really Latin. I read it slowly out loud, and then I ask them questions. Ask them tons of questions. And I think that's where the language really starts getting sunk into. And I ask them simple questions, I ask them yes, no questions, I ask them either or questions. By the way, either or questions, new research, like within the last 3 months has come out on this. Either or questions are some of the best for acquisition. Because they have to analyze the whole phrase and they have to respond with the whole phrase.
You ask the questions in English or Latin?
Latin. Yeah, all the questions are in Latin. And I'll do, this is all stuff on my website about questioning too. That you can just look up. We don't have enough time in an hour to cover all this stuff, but ask a variety of questions. Make sure you ask a variety of questions. In fact, on your back wall, put up where you can see all different question types. This is how I trained myself to ask good questions 20 years ago. And I trained 5 student teachers how to ask good questions, and they're all still teaching. You know how rare that is? How soon does a new teacher drop out? After 3 years, half of all new teachers drop out. You know? So for y'all that are stuck with it, kudos, right? But I put this on my back wall. Yes, no, either or. And then Then fill in the blank, just put a blank like that. And then I'll put who, what, where, when, how much or how many. And then I have a big gap, and then I put why and how questions. And then like what now, what's going to happen. I have all these, and I have a downloadable picture of this that you can print out, put on your back wall. The reason I do this, I'll get to it in 1 second. The reason I do this is because I had a fabulous mentor teacher, in the Super Rose, worldwide known French teacher, that somehow when I was a young teacher just connected with her. She would drive all the way up from Colorado Springs to Loveland where I live and observe me 2 or 3 times a year. And I thought it was hot stuff. You know, I won awards, my students were doing great in the AP test. And she goes, what do you want me to observe? I said, observe how I'm asking questions. And thinking she was going to be glowing. And at the end of the day, she observed my Spanish 1 through AP Spanish. And I said, well, what do you think? How did I do? And she goes, well, I got some bad news and some worse news. What? And she goes, yeah. I said, what's the bad news? She goes, you follow the same pattern of questions all day long. In every class, no matter what level. You ask 3 yes/no questions, and then you ask a who, what, or where question, and then you go back to 3 yes/no questions. That's all you do, just recycle. That's your habit. You don't even realize you're doing it. Like, oh my gosh. You know, what's worse than that? She goes, no one needs to understand any Spanish to answer your questions. And I'm like, what? She goes, yeah. You ask 3 yes/no questions, and the first 2 answers are always no. The third one is always yes. So they're just going, see, or no, see. You know, they don't even understand what you're saying. And then she said, you do a who, what, or where question. And if they just get the first word, they can roughly guess what you're talking about. And you don't ask any higher level thinking questions, and you don't change your pattern from like, oh gosh, what do I do? Go sell used cars, sell insurance. She goes, no, we just have to figure this out. I said, okay, I can put different question types on popsicle sticks and pull them out. It's like, no, that's too random. I'm like, I could write them out. She goes, that's not bad. And so I put the poster in the back wall, and I started writing out my questions. After a while, in Spanish, I'm fluent enough, I could, after a year of doing that, I just trained myself to ask all kinds of random questions. In Latin, I haven't got good enough until this year. I've been teaching Latin for 2 years. I've had to write out my questions because I just can't think on my feet fast enough in Latin. And so I think about my questions before I write them out. My students can understand the questions. I just can't come up with them quick. All right? So I think it's that back and forth, that kind of question really gets the thing going. Yes?
Can you give an example of an either or question that you might ask?
Yeah. Let's see. In the book, Rufus et Arma Atra, who's got that? It's right there, right? Okay. I would say, does Rufus like the gladiator with black weapons, or does Rufus like the gladiator with the white weapons? Like, it's a super simple yes/no question. All right? And I use the body language with it. But I teach them the word on, or. That works really, really well.
Do you ask the questions in English?
All the questions are in Latin.
And the answers?
And their answers are in Latin.
As well. So the teaching language is Latin from the beginning.
Yes, yeah. from the first day.
It makes
it's in
it,
Latin.
makes it lively.
Yeah, because, ACTFL, the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages, ACT, they suggest that in a world language class, we use 90% target. So I've always done it in Spanish. In fact, it's been like 95%. I try to do that in Latin. The questions are in Latin, and the students respond. Now, you give them short little leads, to say yes and no and maybe in Latin, and you teach them what they know. I suggest you put question words up above your whiteboard. Question words in Latin.
So it would be ita is and non is.
Hmm?
Would it be then ita is as yes and non
Yeah.
is as no?
Would you say ita and minime? That's what I use. What do you use for this? Dones?
No, I had graduated in Latin. I mean, I was in a grammar school, in a classical grammar school.
Oh, okay.
And I started with Latin, so I had it 9 years.
Oh,
And we also started with this, but unfortunately, the teaching language was not. It was not in Latin. It was in it was in my case, it was German.
yes,
And it
that's a
was-
problem.
It was a problem, and then we switched too early in the stage of the classical Latin. I mean, of all this classical literature, instead to make it lively. To how Romans lived and how was the household and how was pater familias and all this.
Yeah.
It was a pity, and also we never had enough time then to consider the late Latin. For example, this Pedron, where the Vulgar Latin started, and also Melanchthon and Augustinus. We did not read it so that we could see the process of the development of the Latin language. So
This
was more a statement.
what you're saying, it brings up lots of issues with teaching Latin like that. If we spend too much time speaking in English, like describing the grammar or describing what life was like here, then we're robbing them of comprehensive input. This is how people acquire language, is by input in the language, by asking questions and then answering and thinking about it. If it's all English explanations, we're robbing them of the thing that really gets them to acquire language. So I'm going to show you some other ways to do this too. But yes.
So I just got done teaching my first year of Latin. It's a heavy grammar method,
Yeah.
of course.
That-
And I'm actually from an ESL background, so
Okay.
I know all about TPR.
Okay.
And can you just give some thoughts, reflections of somebody who's, new at Latin, who does it as a teacher? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What were your thoughts, reflections on teaching, just even saying the question words and maybe building confidence as a teacher to do this for the students?
Very, very good. Like I said, I had to write out my questions with what we're talking about. If we're reading that book, Rufus et Arma Atra, I would read a chapter to ahead and think for every paragraph, what are some questions I could ask about this? What's some really easy ones? What's the boy's name? It's in the title.
Yeah.
Right? Rufus, what's his name? Is he a big boy or is he a little boy? Little boy. Does he have a family or does he live alone? Oh, he lives alone. Where does he live? Rome. Oh, just keep asking all these questions. Those are several questions you could ask in the first little tiny paragraph. And so I would read ahead and I would write down questions to ask the kids. And I don't just leave them, I'll just blurt out the questions. I go really slow. In fact, this is a great technique. You have all your question words up here. And if I said, where, if I'll touch the Latin word where, it's written in Latin and in English, but I will touch it. So this was what I say, where does Rufus live? And this practice slows me down enough, even in Latin, where the kids can catch up with me. I just blurt it out, trying to show how fluent I am, how much I know the content. That just doesn't work. right? So, yeah, right, so point and pause or use actions, right? It's your actions, it's your voice that's really gonna get things, get them to understand. And so that's what I do. You can use the books as a kind of a backbone of a curriculum. But look also my Latin page. I have 2 really good examples of easy, simple first week stories that kids can learn just really, really fast. And they have like 10 verbs. Teach the verbs first with actions and get them going with that. Yes?
I'm starting to get a general picture of what a class session looks like.
Yeah.
Could you just lay it out for me? What do you do? Students walk into class, how long do you have? How do you spend that time?
All right. Our classes last year were 45 minutes, which seemed like a blur. This year they're gonna be an hour. We lobbied hard for them. And so here's the first thing. I'm standing here at the doorway. The kids come in, they line up, and I greet every single student. They say the password. The password, and these are on my website, and I love your input too. I did a lot of this for y'all, okay? I have a list of about 33 passwords that I'm thinking of using for next year for Latin mottos. And I use about 25 a year. And they're expressions from the church, they're expressions from ancient Rome, they're expressions that we use in that literate English speakers use all the time. They line up at the door and they say it to me, and then I'll ask them a question about it. Well, like the very first one we ever did was carpe diem, you know? And they say carpe diem. I say, what does that mean? They'll say what it means. I say, when would you be thinking this? You know, or how could you use this? How could this help you with your life? I'm asking like a different question every kid. I throw softball questions to the slower kids, right? I throw curveballs or fastballs to the faster kids, right? So that's when they walk in. I'm still greeting his kids here. I assign the rowdiest kid in the class the job of passing out their whiteboards and their markers. And then on the board, in the same color and in the same place every day, is the do now, the quite nunc. All right, do it now. It's always 5 questions, and it's about something we did last class period. Or sometimes I'll say, write your 5 favorite passwords. All right, that gives them something to do, so they're not running around throwing stuff while I'm out here greeting the laggard students, right? And so that's the first 10 seconds of class. Then we check their answers. What'd you get? You know, it's just, oh yeah, that's good. That's good. And then we'll start with the lesson. Usually, I'm doing this more and more. I like to teach 3 words with actions, or review 3 words with actions at the beginning of every period. And so I have them stand up for learning words with action. And I'll say the word, I'll write it in Latin and in English, Latin in one color, English in another color on the board. And then they'll actively say, let's do a gesture for it. Like here, you know, here's likes in sign language, plaque it, you know. And say, unless you can think of a better one, okay, let's use this. And we'll do 3 gestures, 3 words and 3 gestures. And a lot of times it's review, but sometimes, you know, with Latin 2 or Latin 3, it's in like the past tense or the future tense or something like that. It's a word they know, but maybe in a different tense, different age. And they'll do those like that. I'll ask them to do 3, probably about 3 crazy commands with it, you know, like, you know, not even, just 3 commands. Stand, show me you understand, stands up slowly. You know? And then show me you understand, sits down fast. You know, show you understand, walks in a circle. You know, show me you understand, gives the girl a book. You know, just, And they're previews of a story we're going to tell in class or a story we're going to read in class. So that's the first 5-10 minutes. Yes?
If I may be permitted to play the Advocatus Diaboli, the
Okay,
devil's
sure.
advocate. In the early 1900s at the Perse School in Britain, they had similar things. W.H.D. Rouse, Appleton and Jones. A lot of good stuff you can find on Google Books from them.
It's going to be fast because we're running out of time. Okay.
They received criticism from well-known classicists of their day. Today, some of the books receive criticism for their Latinity, for the correctness of their Latin. For example, I found in one of them the phrase pugnare inter, which is not really found and attested in classical sources. It's typically pugnare cum. So if you could potentially address maybe the benefits or lack thereof of reading stuff that would not actually be found in standard Latin sources.
Much of the words in these little books are not in standard Latin sources, but it's good Latin, right? The words are correct and the grammar is correct. Fortunately, we have a method of improving these. I was alerted there was a couple of typos or maybe not correct language use in a couple of these books. I alerted the publisher, and all these books are reprints of those. And so we did what they may not have had back in the early 1900s. We have the ability to change things on a dime nowadays. I'm not sure if that can actually answer your question. But I'm really proud of my students here. My students, was it this one? No, or I think it was this one actually. We were reading this in my Latin 2 class, and my students found some errors in it. Like not grammatical errors, but it was missing chapter 4. They just went chapter 3, chapter 5. And then some of the words in the glossary were a little bit out of alphabetical order. We told the author, and another author that works with this guy, and he visited our class via Zoom. I thought it was going to be 10 minutes. He was with us for an hour. Just talking, the kids were asking great questions. And he said, "Have you read Idus Martia?" And they said, he goes, "What was your favorite chapter?" They all said, "Yeah, chapter 4. A missing chapter." No, but this has been fixed in this book. And I was really proud of my students. So that, I think that the point is, and this all should ease the minds of a lot of people. None of us are native speakers of Latin. None of us speak Latin fluidly like a native speaker would. Yeah, maybe there's something. I've listened to some people on YouTube that sure sing like they are. But the good thing is that even if you're not saying every single thing exactly, precisely, or you're only saying 98, 99%, wow, your students are still going to pick up lots and lots of good language. So I would say that's not a giant issue, like if there's some errors in some of the books that we find. Is that satisfying?
Yes, sir.
All right. We're running out of time, but I want to pass around a few things here. I want these back. These ones I'm going to give away to you. The publisher wants me to give those to you. And I said he needs to come here next year. He's a Christian. He was catechized as Missouri Synod Lutheran in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. But he's all in favor. I know him well, and they're working on those. He gave those books to us. But these ones here, and this kind of circles back to our Latin question. Get something like this. This by this Lance Plantagenet. It's Magister P's pop-up grammar. This has really been helpful to me because I'm still acquiring Latin. But it has short, simple explanations of all the grammar in Latin, or the major grammar in Latin. And it's really good to review or to get the words for you to explain how this stuff works when a kid has a question. And I'm all in favor when a kid asks a question, of giving them an answer about the grammar quickly, like 10-second long answer. Not my 10-hour wonderful unit, a subjunctive or something, okay? I just a quick answer, how it's formed and what it means, go on, okay? This is a fabulous book. There's no exercises in there, there's no practice, it's just quick, simple explanation of how stuff works. These two, if you want to go into this more deeply, this is how to teach reading in another language. Wonderful guy there. This one is real easy to read. Bill Van Patten, while we're on the topic, this to explain to you how this stuff works. And I just bought this here after lunch. I just bought this. This is decent. I'm going to look through it. I looked in the index and they cite all the right people, so I think it's pretty good. There's like 3 or 4 more copies down there. They're very proud of it. It's like $50, I think. But maybe your school pay for it. So that's a good one too. I'm just passing these around while we're got 10 minutes left here. This is a wonderful thing to have. The LSB. I have marked in green everything that was originally written in Latin. Look at all those. Isn't that crazy? It's really good. So you can glance through this, and I'll hang around here afterwards if you want to look at it. In the glossary, all the green is from Latin. The orange is from Greek, and the blue is from Hebrew. All right? Look at all of it. It's like the whole doggone book is Latin, right? And so that's all the hymns that were originally in Latin. Fabulous. I have an activity that we did. It's on my website on the Latin page. There's a Latin scavenger hunt, and the first part is looking in the LSB, Lutheran Service Book, and the second part is turn loose in your church. Where is Latin, or maybe Greek or Hebrew in your church? And it's really fun for the kids, and they see this stuff. So Pastor Hayes, you just did this with your students in your church. Do you want to say a couple words about that? Scavenger hunt?
They did it, and yeah, they loved it. I had to give some hints because in our church, some of the things would be found like in a book, in the hymnal, something like that.
Yeah, some of them, the first part is what's in the hymnal. And some of you may have to ask your pastor to lay out some of his vestments or things like that. They have some Latin symbols or words on and stuff too. So when I show kids that, they're just like, oh, whoa. So I love doing that. I had a lot of fun just marking that up. That's really fun. Let me show you a couple other things that help to teach Latin. I'm still answering your question, right?
Yes.
We're only 10 minutes in. We have a list of rejoinders up on the wall. I put them right here, they're color-coded. And rejoinders are sayings that people say all the time to keep conversations going and to show that you're listening. I started in a clue on this right after I got married. But it's not because my wife talks a lot. That's not one of my wife's jokes, right? It's because she's quiet. But her sister, oh my goodness, her sister just talks. And so I would overhear my wife, I only heard my wife's side of the conversation. And my wife is saying, really? Oh, you're kidding. Me too. No way. My wife would say 2 words, and her sister's saying 300 words, right? But my wife was showing she was engaged, showing she was listening, she was reacting. It's polite. Rejoinders are wonderful. I have a list of rejoinders on my website in Latin that you can use. And so kids say those all the time. It sounds like they're just being rude. There's like mate, optime, minime. There's like blurting stuff out constantly in class to participate in the class, to show that they're paying attention in class. And it really works well. It's like attention reliever. Because does anyone, like if you're trying to run your class in Latin, does anyone have a problem with kids blurting out in English? They're talking in English? I do like crazy. I used to until I started using rejoinders. But they're color coded. I have them color coded on my website. You can scroll down. Just look at the rejoinders. That's one way we really work. So we got set a password, Latin model coming in. Do the do now, which I can do, and we go over that. And then we stand up, we do some gestures, learn some new words, or some new twists on some old words. And they're saying their rejoinders all the time. And then we will do, like every other week, maybe, special person interviews. And I have these questions for special person interviews in 13 different languages on my website. And so Latin is one of them. I've got lots of really good questions. And we ask a student questions about themselves. The first one is, what is your name? You know? Even though I know their name, and everyone knows the kid's name, you know? But we ask them that, and we say, you know, what is your name? We say, how old are you? Where do you live? So like some easy ones, they know those. But the trick is with those, a lot of your kids will have gone to school with each other and they did in church or whatever. And so they know that about each other. But you wait until the kid shows a little bit of interest in their own answer, you know? And their eyes will light up, they'll lean forward a little bit, and it's just like, I want you to ask me about this, but you really have to interact with them, you know, just watch them. And when they show interest in their own answer, then you follow up, you start asking question after question. I could finally do that in Latin, but I had to really think about it and write it out like crazy when I first started this. Okay, and if you haven't done something like this, where you're having to think on your feet in Latin, you may have to write out questions for that too. So we'll do that, we'll ask all these questions. What do you like to do? What, you know, do you play any sports? Do you play any instruments? Do you have a dog? You know, when I first started Latin, I didn't even know the word for dog, you know? And I didn't know the word for white or brown, or even the dog. I didn't know anything. So I had to quit doing them for a while until my Latin improved. So that may be the case with some of y'all. I mean, some of y'all are really fluent in Latin. But we'll do the special person interviews. And then we'll talk about, so that's like 10 minutes, maybe 15. If it's going really well, it's the whole class. Because that's way, talking to one kid who's excited about their life and their answers is way more interesting than any lesson I can come up with. It's more engaging, it grabs their attention. And so I've had the special person interviews go on the whole class, but I budget about 10 minutes for them in my lesson. And then after that, I usually will kind of end with books, what books you're reading, or talk about a book we're going to read, or we'll start reading a book, I'll read it in Latin, ask a bunch of questions. Need to reread this tonight, so come tomorrow. It works just magnificently well. I mean, just astoundingly well. If you have a device, I'm not going to show it tonight, but if you have a device, look on there. Does anyone have one? I guess, doesn't matter. Write down Romulus and Remus. This is a story we did about Romulus and Remus. I taught it as a scaffolded reading, tiered reading. It's called embedded reading. Or a real quick version of Romulus and Remus. There are two baby boys. Their names are Romulus and Remus. They were the grandsons of the king. The king was deposed. That's an unusual word. The king was deposed. Their uncle wants to kill them. They were placed by the river. They were raised by a wolf. Later, they started a city, you know. I mean, just give them a little bit of what Romulus and Remus is about. It's mythology of ancient Rome. And then that's the first version, like 50 words. The next version is 100 words. The next version is like 200 words. And the final version is like 400 words. And they can understand it. But look on my website there. There's an 88-word question test about Romulus and Remus. I originally wrote those 88 questions to ask orally about it. I asked many of those questions, but then I just gave it to them as a test in class. Almost all of them got 100% on it. It's pretty good. Look, does anybody have that up? Anybody looking at that right now? Yes. Yeah. So that's press the where it says here. So you can yeah. So nobody can see this, but it starts. It has cover page with art from the ancient world about Romulus and Remus. But I have my actual 4th grade granddaughter's quiz here, or test here. 3 pages or 4 pages long. And she got 87 out of 88 questions. And it's because I was just being, I didn't want to show favoritism, so I didn't give her a half point on that last question. I probably should have. But so that's the kind of thing we will do. When we end the class, I say to them, I say, class, and we do lots of call and response too. One of my call and responses, I say, discipuli, and they go, Ita, nice. And I say, thank you for learning. And they say, thank you for teaching us. I didn't make that. I got that from a book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. Wonderful. Every single class, every kid says, I thank them for learning, and they thank me for teaching them. And it just keeps our roll straight. I'm not trying to entertain you. I'm not trying to babysit you. You know, I'm teaching and you're learning, right? You know, it's like that drives it into me. And then at the end, I'm thinking of doing this. I got this from a book, Moonwalking with Einstein. Anybody know this book? About learning, about memorizing. I'm thinking of doing the equivalent. I'm going to say, you know, may the peace of the Lord be with you, and may your dendrites flourish. You know? And that's where I got that from. So that's how I end class. And they can't leave. They don't stand up. They don't pack up until I say, class. And they say, yes, teacher. Thank you for learning. Thank you for teaching us. Peace of the Lord be with you, and your dendrites cells flourish. So that's a quick rundown of the class. That's in general how it works. Yes?
Just the question, how do you tackle the fact that there's not so much contemporary vocabulary in Latin if you want to describe, let's say, I mean, computer is not so difficult.
Right. Yeah, very good.
Or automobile or whatever.
Right. Excellent question. I don't try to cram a computer or cell phone or something like that.
Because I see there's a Wikipedia and a Latin Wikipedia.
Yeah, you
and I don't know how
do
they
that. I don't. I just say computer. We got a new computer. I got a new cell phone.
Yeah, because there's a Wikipedia in Latin. You can choose Latin as a language.
Yeah.
And they, of course, they cover all.
Thank you very much. Wait, before you go, how are we going to distribute these books? There's 30 books here for you. Put more than 30 people, I think.
No, my question was, could this be an approach also, this Wikipedia in Latin?
I wouldn't personally use it until like Latin 4. Using some made-up word for automobile or computer or cell phone tower or something, right?
Yes.
You know, I would agree. Let's do this. Is there any young teachers or new teachers? You have to be young. You've been teaching 3 years or less. Raise your hand. Come get a book. Thank you very much. I will. Okay, great. Yeah. So 3 years or less, come grab a book. The easiest one's on the left, the harder one's on the right. And I have my bookmark in there that I give to my kids on how to read. So, look up story-based books. That's who's donated these. And look them up and contact me, tell them thank you. Okay?